Greetings, fellow Cowboy Curtis superfans. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And welcome to the Pee-wee, as himself, Retrospective podcast. Hey, Dragon, guess what the word of the day is?
Cry?
It's podcast! Oh! Oh!
Ah!
So we have to stick to that, Dragon, every time we say podcast. Oh!
Ah!
All right, we'll see if that doesn't get excruciating. Go on. All right, folks. So this is one of the most highly anticipated pop culture documentaries of the year, and if you all know us, you know that Dragon, you and I are big connoisseurs of pop culture documentaries, indeed. Specifically ones that have like really unique formats, and this one definitely does. If this was just kind of like, I'll say this, Dragon, if this documentary did not have the element of Rubens kind of like ruminating on his own life in the wake of his death and that whole like kind of meta quality to it, him talking with the director, like being argumentative with the director, like that whole framing device, I think this would still be a good documentary. I wouldn't necessarily feel compelled to talk about it as its own podcast, but because it does have that kind of like meta quality to it, I definitely think this warrants a discussion. So let's see. Before we give our thoughts on the documentary, I guess we can give our thoughts on the documentary, but before we do that, I want to kind of just briefly go over, I'm sure we've talked about it before, but our history with Pee-wee Herman, just as a cultural icon, just very briefly. So for me, I definitely remember when I was a kid in the 90s. I do remember when the sting happened, and I remember like Pee-wee potentially being, I don't want to say the word, but you know what word I'm thinking of. Like that was definitely a topic of conversation. I didn't even understand what that meant at the time. I had seen a couple episodes of the show here and there. I didn't really become a fan until, I'm sure a lot of people probably don't even remember this, but there was a brief period of time where Adult Swim started airing reruns of Pee-wee's Playhouse. And Dragon, at that time period, that's when I got into it deep, man. I got into the Pee-wee lore. I love me some Cowboy Curtis. Cowboy Curtis is my favorite character in the Pee-wee universe, hence the opening. I love the creativity, just the unabashed, like self-expression on display from that character. And then, of course, moving forward, Dragon, you and I, we had Pee-wee's Big Holiday, and that was almost kind of like a watershed moment for us, like as podcast co-hosts. That was early in our career, but I feel like that was like one of the first times that you and I had something that we really kind of like latched onto. It wasn't necessarily like a big part of pop culture, but like it just really, really struck a chord with the both of us. So obviously, we lost Rubens a couple years ago, and ever since then, I have heard of this documentary. I have heard that it was in production, so we got the trailer about a month ago, and I was stoked. And suffice to say, this is honestly, like, I knew this thing was going to get original or was going to get, like, dramatic and raw, but man, the last half of the last episode is, like, I say it's hard to watch, but I don't say it in like a cringe way. I say it in like a, oh my God, like, you know, like you don't realize like the depths of what this guy went through in the later half of his life and how he had to fight just to basically be seen as not a monster. And I got to tell you, man, like seeing all that play out and his resilience through it all, it just makes me just get that much more respect for the man. I've always admired Paul Rubens, but this kind of like, I don't know. I honestly end with the runtime of almost 3 hours. Dragon, this is almost like an odyssey of a documentary, not like the Odyssey, but this is like an epic documentary in some ways. Like I really felt like I went on a journey watching this whole thing. I was kind of emotionally exhausted by the end of it, but in the best kind of way. So, what say you, sir?
All right. Well, in general, I remember my first inkling of Pee Wee Herman was honestly going back. It was the behind the scenes documentary on the making of the Batman films. It was the Batman cinematic journey.
Mhm.
I was blanking on the name of that.
Shadow of the
One that
Bat, I think.
Shadow of the Bat. That's
Um,
the one they named after the comics, right? The Shadow of the Bat cinematic saga, I think, is what it's called. Anyway, they
One of the best DVD bonus feature documentaries ever.
yeah. What was so great about it too is the way they did. And Superman also had this on his set too, where going through all the Christopher Reeve films. But for the original, kind of the Burton Schumacher films, they kind of had like they kind of connected and kind of went through the kind of the making of the films and kind of in kind of a retrospective capacity and very great, very in depth. Love them to pieces, and that was kind of my first inkling. That okay, so how do we get Tim Burton to direct Batman? Well, again, they go over
Mhm.
the Pee Wee Herman of it all. It's like, oh, okay, so that's how it got his start, and then it led to Beetlejuice, and that gave like enough credibility to okay, we can give him Batman. So that was the interesting thing to me. Is like, huh, I never knew we got what is this Pee Wee Herman thing? And then of course you look into it a little bit further and you watch Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and like, okay, wow, this is really interesting. This is good. I honestly of all the Pee Wee Herman stuff. Now, mind you, this is pre Big Holiday. Was always I feel the best representation of Pee Wee Herman. I just love seeing him on the big screen. It kind of had some Muppet movie energy to it through the Pee
Totally.
Wee Herman kind of vibe, which is why I kind of like it. And then of course I'm with you. I had kind of the Adult Swim kind of introduction to Pee Wee's Playhouse in terms of like okay, so we've got a show and that's what it is. But I didn't really hear about the controversy until around like when I was hearing like I wonder why this is on Adult Swim, and then you look into it, now
I mean, I think that plus, like, I feel like Adult Swim around that time, like, I don't even think it was so much the
it wasn't.
controversy.
They weren't capital. I'm just saying coincidentally, it was like they're not
Right.
capitalizing on it. But again, the idea is
But,
even
like,
from the
especially at
outset.
that time, Adult Swim was just being, like, very experimental. They
Yeah.
knew their audience. They knew their audience would like this.
But it's the idea that the Pee Wee's Playhouse is built upon, as we definitely relearn through this documentary. Pee Wee's Playhouse is built upon kind of a late night stage
Mhm.
show that isn't necessarily like dirty or gratuitous or anything, but again it has some edgy or kind of subversive humor, which again would also play not only for the kids but specifically play for maybe kind of like the kind of the kind of the college crowd,
Yeah, exactly.
which essentially plays well with the Adult Swim crowd. Anyway, so with that, then of course, for me, I think what I really learned about was the E True Hollywood Story, which I'm so happy that we brought up in this documentary. I'm so glad
That
we
Phil
were.
Hartman clip
I
breaks my
know.
heart, dude.
Yes, yeah, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get
Uh-huh.
there. Okay, but that was always my real foray into the controversy, and then the all the VH1 can I love the like I love the 80s and I love the 90s of it all, where they would kind of touch on Paul Rubens, and I was like, okay, this is it was all, and then of course he would just kind of seep into pop culture here and there in places where it was just like, oh yeah, Paul Rubens, he's also a Nightmare Before Christmas, and
I
again,
totally forgot he was in freaking Blow of all things.
how did you forget Blow? That was his big comeback.
I don't know.
Anyway, so the idea is like he would keep kind of working his way back, and of course, Bat-Mite, and I was like, okay, Paul Rubens on the mind, and then ultimately that brought us to our big connecting point, which was one of our tent poles, Pee Wee's Big Holiday, which I still am head over heels for. I love it, and I think it very much it's very full circle with Big Adventure. It celebrates the character, and also again the big thing that movie did that this documentary kind of does is again it kind of it redeems all the stupid controversy this poor guy went through, and just kind of like just puts it all to the side. We don't care. We don't need to dredge it up
Totally,
again.
totally.
We're gonna let him have his moment. Like we shouldn't have put him away in the first place, and we're gonna like
Doesn't
celebrate
matter
him.
that he looks like noticeably older than he did when he last played Pee
Which is
Wee. That doesn't
amazing
matter
because
at
again,
all.
he hasn't lost the step in that
Mhm,
regard.
mhm.
That's what's amazing about him and Joe Manganiello.
It's a bromance for the ages, man. That's how I always describe that movie. It's a bromance for the
I
ages.
still just love Joe Manganiello in the Pee Wee suit. It's party muy perfecto.
Oh my
He's
god.
it's fantastic. And again, it was just always like this high point. And Rubens was having kind of a renaissance with a big holiday, and then he showed up in Gotham, which was another closing of the loop for the man with him playing the
And
Penguin's
he was
father
actually
again.
pretty impactful.
I know he played it so
his
well.
role actually shaped a lot of the Penguin's early character development.
Exactly. So it was again, Paul Rubens he always had our respect. I think we always had a great fondness for him, and especially later in life. And again, I told you this. Did you ever end up? Yeah, you watched Quiz Ladies, right? After I recommended it to you. Quiz Lady, the thing with Aquafina.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
And of course, now that was the last time he had a screen role. He popped up as himself in Quiz Lady at the very end with the Alan Cummings joke.
Right.
So he's so that was the last time we ever saw him. But it was again, it was devastating to lose Paul Rubens. And this, when I found out this documentary was happening, I had no idea it was like in the works. But I was thrilled. I was over the moon about it. So again, I guess bridging into kind of documentary itself with that, I was so hyped when I saw the trailer for this, and HBO has done this sort of thing before. I don't know if Judd Apatow does appear in this, and Apatow usually is the guy who's producing these. So HBO has done a few of these, and Apatow is usually the guy making them behind the scenes. I would not be surprised if he was one of the producers on this, but I didn't quite stick around for that part of the credits.
I totally missed that he was a producer on Big Holiday, by the way.
Oh no, yeah, we talked about that though, Tiki, in our vast coverage of Big Holiday.
We talked about it, but you know my memory.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So I knew full well. So it doesn't surprise me. Of course, he would pop up in this, but I would not surprise me if he also was one of the producers in the making of this because of that. But also, he's been doing a lot of documentaries about like celebrating the great comic talents on HBO. Like for example, he did this, and it's exactly done like this, by the way. So I think you should really check these out. I've told you about these before. Gary Shandling, he covered Gary Shandling in 2 parts, and George Carlin in 2 parts.
Oh, I should definitely check out the Carlin one.
Yeah, I still seriously, the Shandling one's really good too. But and there might be others, but those are the 2 that come to mind. And I don't know if Apatow was involved in this. I think it was on Apple. They had the Steve Martin documentary, which is in 2 parts. Either Hulu or Apple did it, but they did that in 2 parts as well, which is really good too. Anyway, so the kind of the 2-part, it's a fun way of breaking up the cradle to grave thing.
I honestly think I respect the 2-part thing more here than I do in other places, just because both parts are essentially feature-length films. So what you get really does feel, like I said, it feels like you've watched like a saga by the time you get to the end of it. It doesn't feel like just one feature-length movie cut in half. You know what I mean? I
want to say the Judd Apatow 2-part stuff, and maybe even the Steve Martin, were a little over an hour. Steve Martin probably barely over an hour. The other ones, I think, in the vein of this. But you're right. This is the most epic scope. I don't think any have really gone to a full feature length like this. So Anyway, so I was drawing this for like I think the 3 big appeals to this are like 1, we have a great subject in Paul Rubens. 2, Paul Rubens has always been very private and very he's been very bifurcated with his alter ego all throughout these years, where it's always been like the separation between Pee Wee Herman and Paul Rubens. And 3, it's this project has such an interesting shadow of the last thing that Rubens did and was telling his life story. Those are 3 big draws right off the bat to why everyone and their mother should watch this documentary. I just want to call it a documentary. Clearly, it still is a documentary, but it's technically a docu-series. But it's really just 2 movies. It's like the OJ Made in America thing, where it's like it's really one giant.
Didn't OJ Made in America technically get nominated for Best Documentary?
And won. It won.
Right.
Because again, that's technically like a 7-hour movie, but
Okay, if that can be considered a documentary and not a docu-series, this can certainly.
Well, remember though, Tika, the proviso is it has to get at least 1 theatrical release where it's all put together. It's the difference.
Oh yeah, and OJ Made in America definitely did have that.
It did. It had that. That's the only reason it qualified for the Oscar. So if this gets,
I remember like hearing about those screenings and thinking like, man, that would definitely be an undertaking to watch all of that.
So Tiki, if they decide to do that just to give this a shot at not winning the Oscar as we know it, because the Oscars hate quality documentaries. Let's just say
you want to
that.
just like run through the list once again?
Okay, let's.
I mean, we got like won't you be my neighbor is like the heinous one. That's the one where it's like
the other heinous one. There's at least two giant heinous, like okay, two of the best documentaries that are uplift and speak to the human spirit that the Academy just turns their nose up at. Okay, so won't you be my neighbor being the obvious?
I was genuinely like as soon as I saw Won't You Be My Neighbor in theaters, I was like, this is winning best documentary. And it didn't even get nominated.
Okay, there's Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which again I want to emphasize for the folks who may have forgotten.
I genuinely was foolish enough to believe that one actually had a chance, Dragon.
Again, let me be clear. In that movie, Christopher Reeve makes a man walk again. Okay, that the movie again. It's about in which we make the sick we make the sick walk again. All right, and still not good enough for the Academy.
No, but it's about Superman, so it's pop culture trash. PU.
Also, I Am Big Birds to throw a third one in there, but just anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Piece by
Okay.
Piece as well, if you want to go a fourth one.
Sure. Well, I mean, didn't Piece by Piece get the animated nomination?
Nah, no, because it's a fucking Lego movie. Of course,
right. Right. Okay. Okay. So the Academy. The point being,
with Academy and animated movies is that with animated movies, their big bias is that if it's based on a product at all, it doesn't matter how good it is. I don't even think Transformers 1 got nominated last year. But anyways, I digress.
Anyway, okay. The point being, this was so impressive to me. Was stirring great emotion. Mind you, look, this is not at all detriment to the movie, but it's like the thing where there's a very good and logical reason for here. There are a few things I would have liked to have seen discussed that either weren't included or like very little bits and pieces here and there. But again, there are very good with the intrinsic.
Well, it's kind of like the thing with the Steve Jobs movie where you were disappointed that they didn't bring up Pixar at any point. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't exactly the point of what the movie was trying to do.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm saying this is like nitpicking kind of a thing. Like, oh, why couldn't we have seen like that Oscar clip with Pee Wee Herman where RoboCop like he saves him from Ed 209? Like, why couldn't we have worked that in there?
I was kind of surprised we didn't see the "This Is Crack" ad because they.
I know that to me, no, that's the legit one where it feels like we mention that he had to do it, but we don't see it. But again, I want to be clear with things like that. And for example, for me, my big like quibble is like I would have liked to gotten into his voice work for two roles in particular. You and I really like. There's Batmite, but then of course there's the pilot from Star Tours.
Mm-hmm. This Star Tours was a big one. Yeah, you're right. I can't argue there.
But again, I want to be clear. These are quibbles.
Especially because the dude is such an all-encompassing pop culture connoisseur. You would think that would be like one of the proudest things that he's ever done.
Yeah. Now, again, I want to emphasize that these are not actual problems of the movie because, again, the reason those aren't included, the voice work isn't included because, again, it's focused on, it's the delineation between Pee-wee and Paul Rubens. Like, that is his big signature role, and that's kind of what the whole thing, and again, based on like what he goes through because of being Pee Wee Herman, it's very much linked to that. And you probably say, well, we do include like roles like, with his role in Blow and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So yeah, but that's pivotal to him kind of getting out of the hole there. So you kind of, this is kind of stuff
I was very surprised by and kind of disappointed in legitimately. I would have loved to see a Joe Manganiello interview.
So that's the thing. The only other quibble I possibly have with this movie, and again, you're probably wondering why we're talking about the quibbles and kind of the opening kind of thing. But because everything else is very small.
Everything else is pretty much perfect, dude.
This is like literally, it's that I would have loved to see more Big Holly. I'm as pleased Big Holly made the cut because it's a Netflix thing. I wasn't sure like where maybe I don't know.
I would have been pissed if they just didn't mention Big Holiday, dude. That would have been
exactly. Technically, they technically had an out because they mentioned the stage show, which obviously that's the thing they do have. The point being, though, Thankfully, Big Hollow didn't make it. You're right, though. I could have, because you and I are super fans of Big Hollow. We could have used like a whole nother 20 minutes of Big Holiday, but we didn't.
Let's just put out a whole other documentary that's just about the making of Big Holiday.
I'd go for it. I mean, Apatow has weekends free. I'm sure. Like, come on.
Right. No, I seriously I would have loved to hear Joe talk about like the friendship between him and Pee Wee in that movie. Though,
it would have been really nice, but at least we saw him do the root beer barrel toast.
That was nice. That was nice to include. Yeah.
Which again, to me, here I appreciate that because that's the most
that root beer barrel bit is like the definitive, like the end for Pee Wee Herman.
Yes, it makes me bawl practically makes me bawl like a baby with tears of joy when I watch that movie. So it's like, oh man, they include it. Yeah. Okay, so now we're a little. I don't really have background. There's one thing we should know because this is important to the crux of the movie. Okay.
Right.
So the director of this was Matt Wolf. Matt Wolf is a documentarian. And apparently,
it seems like he's done some interesting stuff. I've looked. I need to look into more of his stuff. All his movies sound interesting, at least.
Well, that's the thing. So apparently, just the all-encompassing thing with Matt Wolf that very much is true with this film is that apparently his style of documentary is that he basically he really connects with his subjects. He gets really personal and really just kind of forges that bond with the subjects, which again probably because it's a work that really meant a great deal to him. Which again, presumably with what we learned about Paul Rubin's backstory here, I think that I want to say, given what his other works have kind of centered around, that's really what his connecting point is. But I think Matt Wolf might also be LGBT. I think. So I think maybe that kind of struck a chord with him. I don't know. But the point being, he really goes in deep with his subjects, which is why like kind of our through line of this film, I think, plays so strongly because you can feel like the kind of the hurt in the director at the very end, when kind of he's like on the phone call with Rubens.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
All right. So before we get into things, I want to break down some comments here. Let's see. Kogia says, I actually watched a little bit of the documentary and learned some stuff. I either forgot or didn't know that Lawrence Fishburne was ever in Pee-wee's Playhouse. Dragon, that was one of the big things about the Adult Swim era of airing Pee-wee's Playhouse was I lost it at Lawrence Fishburne being Cowboy Curtis. I mean, not just because of the whole, like, oh, it's Morpheus being super silly, but just Cowboy Curtis just as a character, he's so delightful even outside of like that's not what Lawrence Fishburne normally acts like. He's such an endearing character, and I love how Lawrence Fishburne talked about Cowboy Curtis in this documentary.
Yeah.
Let's see. Little Blue says, what a way to go out for Paul with this documentary. Dragon, I know you're not a music guy, but David Bowie, before he died, he knew that he was on his way out. He knew he did not have a lot of time left on this earth. He recorded his last album called Black Star. And Black Star is basically like a big meditation on death and the afterlife through the perspective of Bowie, who knew that he was dying. And honestly, in some way, I definitely think that this is Paul Rubin's Black Star. So I'll say that much.
All right.
Let's see. We have Teddy saying, I'm Captain All Ears right now. Kogia says Pee-wee's Big Adventures is the one Tim Burton film that you out of all of them, it's the one that you don't like.
Really, let me get this straight. He liked the Alice in Wonderland movie more than he liked Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I mean, probably.
Yeah.
We love you, Kokias. And no, Teddy's just being sarcastic, Kogias. He's not making a pop culture reference. He's just being sarcastic. Okay, the Christopher Reeve documentary is the best documentary I've ever seen. It's definitely up there. It's a really good work.
That's a fair statement. I mean, again, there are a lot of great documentaries out there, mind you, but it's fantastic.
Little Blue just saying, it was my first flight, and I'm still getting used to my programming.
Yep, Captain Rex.
Oh man, classic, iconic performance, dude. Iconic performance.
I can't tell you. The little aside. I always loved that aspect, and I remember when I was a kid going on, even like something like Jimmy Neutron, Nicktoon Blast. I would say to my folks, like I would quote Captain Rex when I was on the. It's my first flight.
That's funny. That's funny. Kogias, just you do you, buddy. That's totally fair if you think Burden's version of Alice in Wonderland is your favorite.
It's an opinion. That's
It's
all we're gonna say.
not mine, but
That.
yeah.
No, Tiga, we're just gonna say blankly that is an opinion.
That certainly is a take that one can have.
That is what opinion looks like, Tiki.
Right.
It is a statement of words. That is what an opinion.
And honestly, what Little Blue just pointed out, that's honestly the one thing I am kind of surprised by, what as far as like them not bringing Rex up at all, is that yeah, he did love the character so much that he came back to voice him in Galaxy's Edge. So it's like I'm surprised it didn't get at least a mention.
Yeah.
Like I said, especially with all the other like reverence that Paul had for pop culture stuff.
Now, it is possible that one was a Disney thing. That one might have been like they.
Oh, that's true. I didn't even. Yeah,
that one's possible. Netflix might have played a lot nicer than
Disney.
Plus, I mean, Rubens
Iger not letting them use the Disney clips.
Plus, I mean, Netflix or no, I think it might also boil down to. I mean, Paul Rubens owns Pee Wee Herman, so
Sure. Yeah, no, we're saying it is certainly an opinion, Eli. That's all we're saying. It is
these are facts.
An opinion that he is indeed entitled to. Anyways,
yeah.
All right, Dragon. Let's. I'll let you start this off. Where do you?
Okay, so the start of things, something that connects to both parts here. Again, folks, we're not going to landlock at part 1, part 2, but we're linear thinking guys, so we're just going to probably go through it as we experienced it. But the thing that we have to start with, we have to talk about. So the structure and the connective tissue of this documentary is we have a lot of material, but also it's finite material. And given the behind the scenes narrative that we weave in throughout, we have essentially a 40-hour interview that was conducted the year or so before Paul Rubens' passing. Essentially the way it breaks down is like part 1 is the formation of Rubens and Pee Wee Herman, him achieving his goal of success via a big adventure, and then part 2.
You know what? One thing that I really respect about the way that they broke this off is that I respect that they didn't just go for the cliffhanger of like, and then I went to Florida and got busted and everything went wrong. Tune into part 2.
Right, but I do love
that we didn't really get into the actual dark shit until roughly about halfway through the second half.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. So the way it kind of works out is part 2 is like we overall it's the cost of fame, but importantly we don't just it's not a hard cut to controversy. It's we have him at the he achieved his goal and then he achieved an unexpected success at the top. So again, he's still riding high, and then you're right. I want to say let's say 40-minute mark, or maybe with 40 minutes remaining. I think it's 40 minutes remaining in the documentary. That's when we have that's when we hit the controversy, which again, you got to remember, Tiki, a lot of people are going into this thing because they want the dirt. They want the,
That's what I respect about the approach they took. Because honestly, just knowing that it was a 2-parter, I just kind of assumed that the entire second half was going to be about that. And I feel like they really showed some restraint and respect to Paul by not making it that way.
Because think about it, Tiki, again, so the big, I guess, you want to look at it from a cynical point of view of HBO today, or because mind you, what's really great about this too is that the fact that this is an HBO documentary, this is Paul Rubens closing a loop in his life in a very big way. Because again, Pee Wee's not just Pee Wee's Playhouse, but specifically, the Pee Wee's Playhouse kind of stage show was, when it was first recorded, it was like an HBO special. It was essentially a recording stand-up, which HBO used to do back in the day before it really hit it big, Sopranos and everything, and all that.
Was home box office.
Exactly, which we covered. So the home box office era. So Paul Rubens is one of the things.
I love the observation that it changed to HBO right around the time that KFC, like Kentucky Fried Chicken, turned into KFC.
Yeah, which is great. But that's the thing. So that's what he's mentioning there again. That's him close of all. I don't know if he had really had a say in it one way or another, given that Patel may or may not have had a hand in this. I don't know. But again, accident or no, or if he has a choice in this, it's the fact that he's kind of paying it forward with HBO gave him his start, and so he's taking his life story to HBO, and bringing to a close, and it also kind of I don't know, it just feels very very significant. And again, whether HBO maybe with an agenda here for Bruce, or again, it's just more of like, hey, let's just take it to HBO, kind of as kind of like a fun, nostalgic going home kind of thing. If I'm going to have anyone tell my story, it's going to be people giving my start. From a marketing perspective, like part one, the big draw, like if you look up like a summary of this thing, it's going to say, okay, one of the big reasons the documentary is made is like it's Paul Rubens officially coming out, which essentially is what part one is. But again, you would imagine that going into it, but the way it is communicated is very casual, which is like, it's again, because of the horrible thing that we see happen in part two, or the second horrible thing that happens in part two, he was kind of outed, but never officially in his own words. So this is kind of on his own terms. Like, yeah, again, in his towards the end, he's like, I'm just gonna tell my story, and yes, this is who I am.
Right.
Then part two is again covering the controversies. But you're right, though. We're not just like the whole crux of this documentary and our structure and our framing devices, Rubens is having trouble talking about this stuff and trusting the filmmaker to tell his story. And because of that, we're not just cashing in. It's like basically the end payoff of all this is that this documentary, assumedly, is made to the specifications and what Paul Rubens wanted it to be from what he said he would do with it. Like at the end, we asked, like, how would you make this documentary? And I want to say, based on what he said, this is essentially, more or less, this is essentially what he said he wanted. And that's what that's in the edit. That's what we are presented with here, which I think was very tasteful and thought was a really good idea.
Mm-hmm. And probably a big reason, like you kind of said, why we don't get as much non-Pee-wee stuff.
Yeah. And that's the thing, because there's only so much. Even if there's stuff that's missing, whether intentional or no, it's the fact that we probably didn't have time to get into it because it's only 40 hours. So the finite nature of it is really interesting. What made the cut, what didn't make the cut, and what we were lucky enough to get. So our framing device is a talking head formula where it's Paul Rubens in his own words, which again, we have the intrigue knowing that at this point in time when he's filming this, he's not well. This is like he's been dealing. I love that the text on the screen is one of my favorite. I'm a sucker for good text on screen, on a screen like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I love just like the ticking clock kind of thing, where it's like at the top of each parts, and then in part two we kind of throw a little bit more like towards the end, like really informing us of like, okay, there's some really interesting behind the scenes stuff going on here. It's like we kind of start off very casual, and then it like bam on the screen. 40 hours, 40-hour interview, 6 years he's been dealing with his illness. And this is it's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. So he's knowing the intrigue of knowing Paul Rubens is unwell. He's a very private person who's done a lot of damage control over the years, and he's basically telling. It's a tell-all. It's a tell-all of his life, and these cuts to black and like the fine, it's making a fine point of like. I'm sorry, when I say cuts to black, I don't mean just like the text on the screen. I mean like every time we cut back to Paul Rubens, there's like kind of like an ominous like cut to black, and then he comes back on screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I noticed.
I love that because it adds like this fine point of there's a contemplativeness, and again, it's the forebodingness of what we're going to reveal at the end of part two that he's having some issues here, and we recontextualize our narrative a lot here because at the start, Paul Rubens, like being kind of the bubbly bon vivant that he is, you kind of have that gag where it's like, I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding. No, actually, I am kidding. That whole thing where it's very jovial, very lighthearted. It's a throwaway joke. Mm-hmm. And that's the fun of Paul Rubens. Like, oh, okay, that's just him being fun, a fun interview. But again, as we go forward, it's creeping in that he's making these jokes a lot. And there might be some actual doubt and hesitation under the humor of a man who is understandably very distrusting of people telling his story and not in relinquishing control when his whole identity of Pee Wee Herman has been he's all about being in control, being the lead guy on the captain of that ship, and this is being taken away from him. And he has to, and you get a sense he's doing this documentary somewhat reluctantly because he knows he doesn't have enough time. He needs to get the message out there.
Yeah, exactly. So really quick, Teddy, I have not seen all of the rehearsal season 2 yet. I've only seen the first couple episodes. I will have watched the whole thing by the time we do memoirs, though. But the rehearsal Kogias's Nathan Fielder's like crazy. It's like a reality. It's so hard to describe, dude. You have to just look it up. I can't even describe it. Anyways, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So it's kind of interesting that we kind of go back and forth on, like, part one. Obviously, we can't just start with Pee Wee Herman. We got to start with, we got to introduce Paul Reubens. We know we get to learn who he is. So basically, it's kind of Paul Reubens' metamorphosis into Pee Wee Herman, and then back to Reubens. And by the end, again, we have kind of Pee Wee Herman kind of re-entering his life. So it's kind of a nice kind of a flip flop we have going on there. But part one overall, we get to the DNA of Pee Wee Herman in Paul Reubens' upbringing. It's very key in showing how the two are linked, and showing how the two, again, they're not literally split personalities. They're very much like, it's a role that overtook his life. It's kind of typecasting in the most personal way you could possibly, where he's not being typecasted. It's kind of his whole life is being shaped by a persona that he invented. There's a lot of dual identity stuff with Reubens and his life story. So we establish in part one, the goal of the film is to show Pee Wee is a phenomenal character, but a phenomenal character that has overshadowed the man, Paul Reubens. That's essentially what our mission statement is for part one.
Yeah, and so, obviously, like me, you don't have to make fun of how terrible my stand-up is, because I know. But I do think it's kind of inspirational seeing, like, the genesis of the Pee Wee character, and just having like that one bit that just connects so well with people. Like, Dragon, honestly, that's the dream for me. Like, I know that I'm not going to get anywhere just doing my whole, like, the bits that I'm doing, but like I want.
You want to be able to get away with throwing Tootsie Rolls and just being able to get some laughs from it.
Right. Yeah, essentially, yes. Yeah. But man, just talking about, like, the way he talks about those early shows with such it genuinely kind of gave me chills. I know that's almost like sentimental to say it, but I'm not lying, man. It really did.
So in getting him to the groundlings when that kind of stuff happens, I love that so in his backstory, again, with the informational component of this documentary, we hit a few interesting points in his life. So he's always a kid that was kind of longing for stardom and fame, and he loved Howdy Doody, Captain Kangaroo, and Mickey Mouse Club, which again obviously pays off big time when we get to Pee Wee's Playhouse.
Mm-hmm.
He pays it forward. I love that. I didn't know. Again, I learned so much about Reubens' family here. I had no idea his father was like this macho Indiana Jones-esque, stunt pilot guy. And he had his love of the circus stems from kind of that lifestyle.
Right, which is kind of crazy that like it gave him the love of the circus, but it also kind of is one of the big reasons why he was so guarded about his sexuality his whole life.
Yeah,
kind of a double-edged sword in that way.
And I love kind of the foreshadowing when I saw that. Oh yeah, I knew he loved the circus, but I didn't know how deep it went. And the fact that, because again, we know Big Top Pee Wee, which we get into, it did not go well.
I still really need to watch that. I've never actually sat down and watched
it. Yeah. It has moments, but it's definitely, of the trilogy, it's the weak one. It's the.
I mean, I'm not surprised about that, but I feel like as a completionist, I still kind of owe it to Reubens to see it for myself.
True.
I don't know.
Anyway, so here's something I was really fascinated by, because I always heard all the behind the scenes, especially when we did our deep dives on Big Holiday, and I did a lot of research into it. And then went back and did Big Adventure. I always knew, because of that, he was very into the movie Pollyanna. Disney movie.
Yeah, right. That was a big thing. That was surprising how much of a thorough line that was.
Which, oddly, we're allowed to use Pollyanna, yet not Star Tours.
Disney doesn't give a shit about Pollyanna. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Bob Iger's probably just like, Pollyanna, what's that?
Is one of ours?
Dragon, Disney doesn't give a shit about anything that Walt Disney made when he was alive. All right, let's just call a spade a spade.
Okay. Put down the lighter fluid, Tiki. All right, so anyway, so the origin of the Pollyanna Love Fest, and I love this origin, is the fact that the main reason he loves Pollyanna, not just for like the idea of like the whole like the girl bringing all the people together. It's very wholesome and
Almost kind of like that Mickey Rooney, like you've got a barn and I've got a show, that kind of thing, you know.
my uncle's got a barn. Let's put on a show.
Right. It's kind of that a little bit.
So the fun thing with this is that his arch nemesis, his rival, Kevin Corcoran, was the kid in Pollyanna. So the idea was like, I could do that better. That's essentially what motivated him to become an actor. That's why deep down
that
he
kid
really
very much like you got to imagine there's some level of Francis there, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Well, you know what's funny? You mentioned Francis.
Uh-huh.
We the kid sticks his head underwater, so it's a little bit like
Right.
Francis. Anyway, so but seriously, the idea of like the girl bringing all the people together, and it's the fact that he always tried infusing this movie into Pee Wee somewhat unsuccessfully each time. I would argue Big Holiday is like is the closest he ever got to it, where it wasn't deliberate, but it kind of happened that way and it worked out. Where he starts off Big Adventure with the Pollyanna, and then he realizes, screw the Pollyanna thing, let's do the bike story, which worked great.
Right.
He then did Pollyanna with Big Top Pee Wee, flopped tremendously, and I would argue Big Holiday. We the third act of that movie, we see all the people that Pee Wee had impacted. That's kind of the successful Pollyanna. I'm just saying we don't paralyze him. We put him down a well. It's kind of Pollyanna. I don't know. Just throw it out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so the point being, so after we've established those, we get to sexuality, which again is been a thing that within the controversy people have speculate. I forget if we knew what the adult movie was in particular. I don't know if it was something that very much communicated that okay, he's probably gay. So it was always something. It was kind of tit for tat in Hollywood kind of a thing. But we explored, the idea is he explored things in Cal Arts and kind of his college years through the art of photography, and that's where he realized, dressing in drag was something that kind of appealed to him, and it kind of proceeded from there.
But I think one of the big misconceptions about that is that a lot of the times with drag, it's less about like the sexuality and it's more about like the freedom of being able to be someone that you're not.
Well, yeah, so it's the passing thing that he gets from that. That's the main thing.
Right, exactly.
So I love that we make the distinction here, though, that again, in passing, it's the fact that was like motivated his character work. That was the motivation for character work. That this is something I can really get into. And again, it's not that drag like put him on a path.
No, you're good. I just want to clarify that.
Yeah, it's the fact that like in the art scene that he was in with that and kind of like the people that he was meeting, I think maybe certain things clicked. That's in the documentary. We don't spell these things out. It's not like there's a huge like, and then I looked into his eye. We don't have that kind of thing. It's just like, it's just he met. But it's really nice though that in part one we established that Rubens, he really sacrificed. The only serious relationship he ever had was with not just a guy but Guy. Was with Guy.
Is his name really Guy?
Yeah, his name was Guy. That was the gag. It was his name is Guy. So he's dating Guy, who he gets the chocolatey, kind of like the ease.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. Guy was the guy, Dragon.
Yeah. So
it's essentially that guy was essentially the basis for Pee-wee's entire character in some ways, which is crazy.
I mean, he pulled elements from here and there. Like, for example, we have like the, kind of like some of the Pee-wee-isms from Guy. We have, when he goes on the Gong Show, we have, kind of our somewhat insanely racist Native American.
I think it's like, I'm glad that Rubens was very much just like, I know it's problematic as fuck. I'm not making any arguments.
But it's crazy to think that had Jay Longtoe had gone over, like there's a chance that Jay Longtoe might have been the Pee-wee had he not kind of moved on to like a better. Because let's think about it. Remember, Jay Longtoe is where, because of the name Longtoe, it's where we get like the tequila dance from. So we're getting all these iconic like things of Pee-wee here and there from things in the circus element, all that. Anyway, but yeah, so with Guy, again, we have like the one romantic, like he's had relationships in terms of like personal relationships with a few people like Debbie Mazur we're going to get into, but it's like he's had like the one romantic relationship he had was with this person. And again, in committing himself fully to work and kind of knowing on some level that even if it is somewhat more progressive, vaguely more progressive times then, he's compared to the 50s, he's it's Hollywood. So again, he kind of had to put a lot of himself. That's where he started to put himself in a box,
Mm-hmm.
So it's sad, and it's really sad that he reconnected with them that one time, and it was like hours before the man died.
Yeah, for sure.
Very sad. I found it so uplifting that his father loved and supported, like sent him that letter. I want you to be the best homosexual you can be. It was just
That's
God.
awesome, because when the father's first introduced, you're kind of thinking, like, is this guy going to be like a major problem? Is this guy basically going to be like the worst thing about Paul Rubens' whole life? Like the biggest obstacle.
I know you have that misconception at first where you're thinking, because they didn't. However, they did make the point, and we pay it off in part two. Is we set up that his father was very traditional, very macho, and that was the difference. Where the son was a lot more kind of sensitive and softer than the father, but again, it was never a wedge between them. It was kind of like an unspoken divide. It was like it was a generational divide between them.
Right.
I mean, let me tell you this, Tiki. I'm not going to get into a whole tangent. I told Jacob, I've traumatized all the Phineas and Ferb people.
God.
Well, I think technically they're all here, so I've traumatized all these guys. Mentioning, I read this book, Becoming Superman, which is about the wonderful writer J. Michael Straczynski, JMS. JMS tells his life story, and JMS he had, without question, the worst father in history. I mean, Tiki, the worst father you can think of, this guy, he's worse.
I believe you, just because of
how if you read this book, Tiki, you will appreciate any things you don't like about your father. You will shove them to the side and I appreciate my father so much more now.
Right.
He was like that bad. I mean, I'm not going to tell you now because I don't want to distract from Rubens. I'm just going to say that the point being. Could have gone that direction. Thank God it didn't. Anyway, so let's see. So in the formation of the Pee-wee, we have he goes to the Groundlings. He makes some friends, including Cassandra Peterson, Elvira.
Yeah,
yeah,
I know her.
We all know Elvira.
But I've actually seen her live once, so No, I'm kidding. But yes.
Yeah. Wait, weren't you in a room with Cassandra Peterson once?
If you count her Not Scary Farm performance as being in the room with her, then yes.
Was it outdoors?
No.
Well, there you go. You were in the room.
It was in a theater.
There you go.
I was in the room where it happened.
Oh, but no, man, they gotta take it there. Yeah,
because making Hamilton puns in 2025 is totally cool, right?
That's
what all the kids are saying these days.
See, I'm trying to give you, Tiki. I'm trying to give you street credit, and you pull stuff like this. Anyway, so the
millennials love Hamilton, Dragon.
God.
See, my next stand-up bit, just to tease it, is part of the joke is going to be George Lucas talking to Steven Spielberg about how the millennials want CGI in their movies, and Spielberg's just but George, you realize that millennials are 40 years old now. Oh, Steven, you know nothing.
Tiki, why don't you just get it over with and dress like Steve Buscemi and just go on stage like that? Why don't you just
just howdy do fellow kids.
Yeah, exactly. Let's just get it over with and just do that and then walk off stage.
That's the whole bit. That's
the whole bit. That's the whole Kaufman-esque bit. Yes, you go up on stage, say
that. Honestly, don't tempt me with shit like that.
Well, they've seen it all anyway. Anyway, but speaking of Tiki's struggling stand-up career,
it's not struggling if you don't have any aspirations for it.
Okay. Anyway, so the idea that Pee-wee Herman was basically a struggling comic, and that was kind of the idea that he got the name from a harmonica and this kid in the neighborhood, and that's where he gets the name Pee-wee Herman, and he's the struggling comic that then got fleshed out thanks to unbelievably Cheech and Chong.
Mm-hmm.
That was impressed me. I love the little meta.
Did you not know that?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
I did know that.
I didn't know that was like the first time we really like fleshed him out. That's what blew me away. Like I knew Paul Rubens popped up in things here and there, like he's in the Blues Brothers and that kind of
Uh-huh.
But I had no idea like that was like a formative like appearance for him, and let alone it's really meta that he is like a front desk clerk, which of course at the end of Pee Wee's Big Adventure, his big role in the movie,
Right.
front desk clerk,
Paging
paging
Mr.
Mister
Herman.
Herman, Mister
Paging
Herman.
Mr. Herman.
Anyways, of course, all this leads to the stage show, which that was very innocent, very funny, and caused such a buzz that he ends up getting he's booking talk shows. He's selling out theaters, small theaters, but he's selling them out in the regular. And David Letterman is impressed.
Mm-hmm.
So are Warner Brothers executives, and that gives us the movie. He and Tim Burton, fellow oddballs, they get along famously. And I don't know about you, T. I love this little story. I had no idea about the guy. Apparently, when they shot the dinosaur scene, the guy who made those dinosaurs was
I
there.
love that, dude. That was honestly one of my favorite details of the whole documentary was that little tidbit right
Because
there.
you always forget that, oh yeah, they're lit up at night to make them look like that, and just the idea, if you could like
I
the
feel like
infinitesimal.
that whole bit in the documentary is just it's such a good example, like a good like such good evidence for the importance of good lighting in movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna pull a Walt here because apparently the Disney Corporation's having trouble remembering who he is. It's kind of like, well, Tiki, that's a tidbit.
Oh my god! Yes.
Well, Miss Travers, here's a tidbit for you.
Oh god!
It's kind of like one of those things. It's a very wholesome, like the man who created those dinosaurs, he shed a tear over.
Totally, yeah.
Which is really nice. Just the idea, just the infinitesimal chance of like, what if the guy actually made those things, was on set, was around when they were filming, and just kind of casually mentions like, oh my god, they've never looked that beautiful before.
Dragon, I want a documentary about the people that make roadside attractions like that. Seriously, I feel like that would be such a fascinating art form to like explore.
I didn't take you. If you do some digging, you might be able to find some of that.
Possibly, I'm sure. Yeah.
Anyway, so the point being,
I mean, I'm sure I'd be able to find stuff like that on, like that people like Justin Scar have done, but I'm talking like a full big budget documentary though.
oh right, no, you're right about that. That has yet to be made. So I love this. I always love this. Every time I think lovingly to the Pee Wee's Big Adventure, I always think of the endings. I think the ending is perfect. And again, it's like even if we got nothing else from
the silhouette of the bikes.
The silhouette of the bikes, but again, the line that was so good. I want to emphasize the line that was so good and so perfect. They worked it into Toy Story 2. I don't have to watch it, Dottie. I lived it.
Love it. Yeah.
I still that line always warms the cockles of my heart.
It very
every time.
much is like a perfect line for sure.
And again, plus they have that music and everything. It's always like the perfect. And then the movie just took off. It was like I was so glad they included that clip. Anyway, so with that, again, that's the great transition point. I love the way we transition where it's a big sleeper success, but the cost is Pee Wee got all the recognition. We set this up that Pee Wee, he's getting the recognition, not Paul Rubens. He gets the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Right.
It's typecasting, but it's within, but you're within your own shadow. I love the part one ends on this ominous beat of, if I knew I was going to trade in pursuing stardom, I was going to trade my anonymity and privacy for fame. I wish the ink had already dried. Like that was the ink had already dried. It's like this the realization of you signed a deal with the devil of fame, and it's like that's where. So again, it's like not telegraphing. Like it telegraphs what happens. Just it sets up what, like there's going to be a fall. You don't quite know what, obviously we know what it is. We don't quite know what it is yet. We know it's on the horizon. We know there's like strings attached, but it's a perfect end to part one, I felt.
Yeah, totally.
That transitions us essentially to part two. So we establish, again, we open with kind of like, I love the full circle thing we do with the director, by the way, where we have like Rubens kind of making the joking call, but again, joking but not joking. When he's saying, I would like to direct, I would like to be in there for the one-on-one interviews.
Dude, there's so many interactions that Ruben has throughout this thing, where you can feel the tension, and where the director is not quite sure if he's joking or not. there's such a palatable kind of like sense of like uncomfortable tension there.
Yeah, and like Ruben's on the other end of that call before he makes it. He says like he's you can kind of tell he's kind of messing with him a little there. But again, there's an acorn of truth
But at the same
underneath
time,
it.
I kind of feel like the whole like disguising serious stuff as a joke is kind of like one of the big things that Paul had in his playbook, you know?
Oh yeah, he could only it's the ripcord. It's the safe. It's the ripcord of safety. It's the parachute.
Mm-hmm.
So so we established the huge collection in Paul Rubens' awesome house. Now, again, this collection and this house, these are both things that are one. The house is like it's the protective. It's a comfort. It's the protective bubble. We kind of see it in a really in a glowing way. I love the story of how he picked this house, where he sees like it's like this one place
that's
in
one of my
L.A.
favorite moments of the whole movie. Yeah,
It's like the one place in L.A. that has deer.
uh-huh.
And the Hollywood side, I love that. I realized that from the pool, like I can see the Hollywood sign.
Only
that
specifically when you're jumping off of the diving board. I love that little detail.
It's like that's like Sunset Boulevard, man. It's like it's like the whole like the man in the it's the man in the pool.
Totally.
Like you jump, you see the Hollywood sign, then dead. So the other thing too is so again it's kind of the comfort of home, which will also be a prison for him later. Which again,
and then also and we set up the collection is basically like just look how cool and quirky and awesome this is. But like little do we know that because I definitely didn't know the details of like,
that you and I think we were completely blindsided by that. I had no idea what the second controversy until this documentary.
And the fact that they like weaponized his collection like that is just it literally still makes me sick to my stomach.
I think it's like every collector's worst nightmare realized. Mm-hmm. As a collector myself, it's like, oh god, it's like anyway. So Pee-wee's on top of the world, and he gets Pee-wee's Playhouse, which again is it's kind of the stage show worked into a series, and this is where we get Lynn. We already had Lynn Stewart with the show, but of course Lynn Stewart. It's also kind of sad to see her because she also passed away during the making of this.
True.
So we have Lynn Stewart, Charlie's mom from It's Always Sunny for the kids of today.
Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And Lawrence Fishburne, a lot of the other players, they're kind of giving some interviews here. I love that we have like the one lady who's like the male lady who's like the straight woman of the show. I love that we have. Yeah,
no, I honestly, Dragon, I forgot how fun of a character she was until I saw that clip. But you're right, she did fill her role very well as the straight person in that cast.
I love that we don't make a big deal of that, but we did kind of mention in having Lawrence Fishburne and her in there, and we saw some other, also Blackula. We got Blackula in there.
Yes.
I love that we kind of show that it was rather inclusive compared to a lot of kid shows.
It was incredibly inclusive for the time period. Yeah.
This is before we have stuff like Reading Rainbow or like Between the Lines or anything. It was like
was it before Reading Rainbow?
I want to say, this was probably in, so Pee-wee's Big Adventure was in 85. So this was shortly after that. I don't know if it wasn't the end of the 80s, but it was like, I want to say it was in maybe 87 or 86. I want to say. I don't know how soon.
Reading Rainbow was in 83, so this was after Reading Rainbow, my friend.
Okay, my apologies.
Fact check you on that.
Okay, all right. Stop. Well, never mind then. The point being, it's also still very progressive. All right. I don't know. Anyway,
I kind of feel like Pee-wee's Big. It kind of took the formula of something like Sesame Street when it came to like the diverse cast. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, you're right about that. Yeah. I love that we hit the detail. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about. Though. I love that we went really in depth with like how Pee-wee's Playhouse kind of came about in terms of like the production design and everything. I like how we didn't mention the they were relieved that it wasn't just like a Jim Henson ripoff, which I thought was really
it absolutely isn't. Yeah, for sure.
Because it's very
much its own thing.
I had one slight disappointment, and this is very minor, but it's like it's just you and I would have really loved to see him pop up. Craig Bartlett. It would have been great if they worked him in.
Yeah, but again, that's kind of like that's
the whole nother documentary.
Kind of like Michael Fassbender's Steve Jobs talking about Pixar.
I know. Plus, it would have been like, well, I want that guy's story. Let's if we just mention like, oh yeah, he did hair. I'm like, wait, why? Where's that document? Can you go
Right,
back
exactly,
to it?
exactly.
It would have been too distracting. Bartlett's too cool.
I honestly think Bartlett could easily have his own documentary.
Dear God, Tiki, God doesn't love us enough to give us a Hey Arnold, a feature length Hey Arnold documentary. That would make us too happy.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh God, that would be that'd be the next stage, man.
Nickelodeon gave us the Jungle movie, and then they're like, never again! You get nothing else!
Oh God! Imagine that. There's a story for you, man. It's the formation of how Hey Arnold comes about, and then the whole and then we had we had an ending in mind, but then it was taken away from us. Then we came back. It has a happy ending now. Now's the time for it. Anyway. So,
I still want the Patakis, dude. If we ever got the,
that's the thing. They could talk about the Patakis in the documentary.
Yeah.
Because there is no Patakis. We could talk about it though, officially, instead of all this cloak and dagger BS.
All right. Anyways,
so Paul Reubens, essentially, with the kid, he's paying it forward with his love of Howdy Doody and Captain Kangaroo, and he's doing it in the name of.
I love how he mirrored the ending of Howdy Doody with the ending of Playhouse.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had no idea that Pee-wee's Playhouse ended with him selling the Playhouse, which makes all the sense in the world.
I think I had like a vague idea of that. It wasn't like at the forefront of my mind, but I think I knew about the episode. I just didn't know that it was the finale.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. It would be a finale. If you could, mind you, syndication only plays with that, so you can never.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's always hard to actually get an ending because you have an ending.
Also, I love how much lip service they gave to the Christmas special, and I love how proud he is of it because we reviewed the Christmas special pretty early on in our Christmas in July endeavors, and it is indeed I would say the Christmas special is kind of on the Mount Rushmore of stuff that we've ever covered on Christmas in July.
Absolutely. But again, I love the significance of the Christmas special. The idea is a Big Top Pee-wee, his first failure with the character that's ever happened to him. It's by the way, I know I'm going to get to back to the Christmas thing, but I love that with Pee-wee, Big Top Pee-wee.
No, I know you're getting with this.
I had no idea that it was the longest screen kiss.
I found that actually that in itself kind of made me want to check out Big Top Pee-wee.
That is awesome, though.
One of the reasons I've been avoiding it is because I knew that it was it's Pee-wee Herman, but he's got a love story. That doesn't feel right. But no, if Paul Reubens has the sense of humor to include the longest kiss in any movie up to that point just for the sake of the gag, I kind of feel like it's got my sensibilities in mind, dude. I really feel like I should check it out.
I had no idea. What cracks me up is the idea that was the reason that's in there. The reason there's a whole love triangle thing in Big Top Pee-wee. The whole reason that's in there is because it was a response to the whole people not liking how he treated Dottie. So instead of just, which again, the way he treats Dottie is hysterical in Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
That's obviously part of the gag.
Yeah. He has no time for him. It's just what? Okay, fine. I'm gonna make. He's gonna have a whole harem of women. Anyway, so it's really I thought it was so poignant. It's pathetic in the funny, in kind of a funny, sad way. Where again, I feel bad for his failure here, but I do love the perfect visual that he mentions. He showed up, and I love that we see the actual sign. That you see, he had a parking sign, and the idea of his parking sign was being painted over sounds so tragic to me because it was an awesome.
I love
sign.
how he points out that I promise you, this sounds like it happened in a movie, but it was actually real life.
Yeah. God. So the point being, he's feeling down in the dumpster. That's his pick me up was the Christmas special. That was it was just this awesome, just kind of joyful thing with the Pee-wee's Playhouse they had going for him.
Mm-hmm.
And also I love that he's friends with Cher, and Cher did don't bill me, just throw me in there.
That was really nice. Yeah.
But Cher, I like when Cher cameos in things. God help me, I love when she for example, she has a fun kind of role in Stuck on Me that no one ever talks about.
That's the second time you've brought up fucking Stuck on Me.
If one person, Tiki, because I know you're not gonna do it. If one person, say Code Geass anime fan, watches Stuck on Me, you know what? That's a little victory. It's a little something, somebody. if somebody can watch it, at least appreciate some of that movie. I don't
All
know.
right.
Okay, the point being, so overall, again, Pee Wee's Playhouse, it's nice that he's paying it forward. The inspirations that that kind of that were very meaningful to him. He's kind of giving back to the community in that sense, and it's this. The moral and the goal of the show for him is to encourage kids to be nonconformist and be who they are, and just embrace the wacky and just kind of unpredictable, subversive nature of the show, or surreal nature of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have like the Andy Kaufman. I know it's more of an Andy Warhol bit, but it feels very Andy Kaufman. The idea we're going to see a dog eat all the dog food.
Right, right.
And then I think it was funnier. He actually married the fruit salad.
That is a really, really funny bit. Yeah.
I love that. Like the whole story, they're all like having a pajama party. Says, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it? Okay, I will.
Maybe I will.
Maybe I will.
God.
So this is important. We mentioned through the Playhouse, we mentioned the good and bad of Paul Rubens. Now, when I say, I don't mean bad and like bad. I just mean like the again, being a human, we show that he's not a saint like anyone. Everyone's got it's like the whole Mr. Rogers thing. No one's a saint. We remember
Except
that
for actual saints, of course.
Well, yes, Tiki. Aside from the people who are actually labeled saints, yes. So on one hand, we see Paul Rubens in one of our interstitials. He remembers everyone's birthday and he texts them on their birthday. That I found so delightful that he's like, I'm going to be texting everyone. Now they're going to be texting me to text my eye doctor. And on the flip side, though, he was a perfectionist. And again, he always wanted control, which means he bumped heads on pretty much everyone at some point on the production, which led to a bit of a falling out with Phil Hartman, which tragically comes back later.
Yeah.
And you can see that Rubens, he's kind of squirming a little with the Phil Hartman thing, and that
Hartman might be the thing that haunts him most out of anything in his life. It wouldn't surprise me
because he didn't get to say goodbye to Phil Hartman. I'm sure that True Hollywood Story thing really soured him on Hartman. And then of course what happens. Then probably it's like, well, we had unresolved issues.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, because it's the thing where you can feel the regret, not only just for like unsaid things, but I think regret just on Rubens for like bits here and there, like we don't hear his side of this, but Rich, his agent, he took Rich to court. The two of them kind of sued each other over breaking the contract and kind of like finding a new agent because he felt he got a raw deal. So it's the idea, this guy really did help you out, and you kind of go to court with them.
Right.
So these little regrets here and there. So there is something there. And you can kind of see like he doesn't want to talk about Phil Hartman, but because again, it's probably painful. And again, the idea is, at least the way it's presented to us, is that Hartman he went on to SNL. They just wanted to hang his own shingle. Just wanted to do his own thing. It wasn't like a personal affront, at least as far as I can tell. It just seems like I think Rubens probably in the moment during his height of success, like, you're taking away a landmark character that you and I built. You've been a part of my success for so long, and you're leaving. That hurts my feelings, Phil. And then kind of goes from there. But I'm sure it was like a thing where it was kind of a heat of the moment kind of a thing. But again, this is all speculation. But like it's the way we present it is haunting in the right ways.
Yeah, and it's like, obviously, I don't want to think anything bad about Phil Hartman. I think what happened to him is like one of the biggest tragedies in Hollywood history. But man, that clip is tough to watch.
Though. I want to be clear, in that clip, I don't think Phil Hartman's the bad guy in that clip. I think that Howard Stern is irredeemable in that clip. That's what I think.
Well, Howard Stern is just kind of irredeemable in general.
Well, that's what I mean. So I'm just saying with what he does in general, I think in that clip is representative. Okay, that's not
because basically he's baiting Phil Hartman.
Yeah, which Stern does all the time. And that's essentially. So I don't blame Phil Hartman. So I just think that he's just he probably is maybe an additional reason those two never reconcile, which I really think is despicable. But Anyway, so I guess in building that, so we hit, so Big Top Pee Wee, and then we soften things with but basically, once Playhouse, Pee Wee's Playhouse ended, we then we gingerly kind of transitioned to the infamous arrest.
Yeah.
So again, Paul, now you'll note, I want to make it. This is very very interesting, knowing what we know about the production of this documentary through this documentary. So Paul Rubens, he talks about the aftermath, but not the event itself. Because again, that was the interview we did not get after the 40 hours. Had he come in for the final session, they would have covered this. Like he would have talked about like the actual arrest and what would have explained like why he was there and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Not that he needs to, but that's what it would have been. And again, it's so I found that on the rewatch that really hit me like, oh my God, that's really interesting. That's kind of like that's the missing piece, and we don't need that piece, but it's like there is a shadow there, and there's extra pain in what he's talking about with the aftermath. That you can tell it hurts him even just to talk about that much about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But again, with these tragedies that happen to Rubens, it's very interesting that he really makes it clear that he doesn't want to be a victim in all this. What was your take on the victim thing? Like, you know,
I mean, I really respect it. I definitely think that it'd be really easy for someone in his position to just basically be like, and that was essentially the end of my life. But no, I mean, I honestly think one of the most powerful parts of the second half of this, like let's say the final act of the documentary as a whole,
yeah,
is just his resilience through it all, you know, because this is stuff that, like, I mean, Dragon, like, there's him.
He had to come back twice.
I've made references to myself being gender fluid in my stand-up, you know, and it's like, there is some part of me that worries that I'm going to get targeted for shit like that, you know, and it's like, so the fact that Paul was able to, like, just put himself out there, like, so fearlessly, and it just kind of came back, you know, like, I don't know, man. Again, it's like, it's every collector's worst nightmare and every, like, comics worst nightmare also. Just kind of like, I mean, I've always said it, Dragon, but that is kind of the whole, like, people making you a target just because they're jealous of you. That's a big reason why I always joke about this, Dragon, but once we hit 5,000 subs on this channel, if we ever do, that's it. I'm not going past 5,000 subs, dude. That is past my comfort level as far as being a target.
So yeah, I think we approach what happened very tactfully here. You know, it's and the other matter. This was what's so impressive about Ruben's resiliency is that he had to come back twice. You know, from two very traumatic events that happened to him, and it very much damaged, you know, his persona, a character that, again, that, so it's the idea that this fascinating idea of the whole Pee-wee Paul Rubens kind of dichotomy is that, again, he opted to go for the character over himself and put himself in the public eye. Like he went on the dating game, and that's where it was kind of locked in from there on. Where, you know, Pee Wee Herman was basically, you know, he's the living, breathing persona that everyone who's going to see him, they're going to associate him anyway. So I might as well commit to the bit. Which, again, seemingly okay, it's a fun idea, and it reminds you, Tiki, that we don't see that these days for a reason, for what Rubens went through. That's why we don't see it, because there's an inherent kryptonite there. Is that if they ever, it's like it's like a stormtrooper at Comic-Con, or like, you know, or Darth Vader at Comic-Con. There's like a responsibility of like, okay, they have to keep those helmets on, because the minute they take them off, they're not the stormtrooper. You're seeing like beneath the mask or beneath the makeup, or you're seeing, like, you know, the holes in it.
Mm-hmm. So
the idea that, again, Rubens, you know, he didn't see the flaw, and, like, you know, until it was too late, that, you know, he can't really, he's now hiding versus like living. You know, he's hiding, like, I can't get into a relationship because then what if someone finds out? I can't, you know, I like drugs. I can't, like, you know, like, he was a regular, you know, was a regular connoisseur. You know, he can't really, you know, let that get out either. You know, he's very much held up in his really nice house. He's kind of walled up in there to a degree. Mm-hmm. You know, he has an assistant, you know, because he'd get mobbed. And again, it's like so much. So again, he's kind of living in fear to a point. And the idea, this happened in Sarasota, Florida, was that presumably he was visiting his folks in Florida.
That is something I did not know. I just assumed, for some reason, it happened in LA.
No. They say it was. I'm pretty
also,
sure,
like, something like so blatantly, like, homophobic, like, tinged in homophobia. It makes sense that would happen in Florida. Just saying.
Yeah, that's the thing. So his parents. We set up in part one. His parents moved to Sarasota, Florida, and the arrest, because he called LA, which is where his assistant was. So presumably he was
right. Yeah.
Like when the news thing comes up, it says like he was arrested in Sarasota, Florida. So presumably he was visiting his folks, would be my guess. And where else would he be there?
Mhm.
So it's like a guy just looking for like a release, or like, well, I'm in town, I just want to do something kind of for
And
myself
as I'm
away
sure
from.
everybody who has talked about this has mentioned at one point or another, it's a porno theater, bro.
Yeah.
What the fuck do you think people go there for?
And I love the. I really respect that we did make a
if you
point.
can't do that in a porno theater, then what is the point of a fucking porno theater? Except for people that get off on edging, I guess. All right. This has gone off the rails.
Okay, so Tiki, I think the point, the operative point I'm trying to make here is that you and I in our lifetime, we have experienced that story from essentially the true Hollywood story and the VH1 mockery of just like, okay, and Paul Rubens, he was like the VH1 crowd, they're saying, they're kind of the opinion, like I think collective anyone should be, like the public opinion, like, so he went to do something that, yes, is very embarrassing for a kids show host to do, but again, it was like a very human need. It's a human nature. We should all be adults about this, but it became a mockery. Plus the namesake, millions of puns and headlines.
The thing that pisses me off about it the most is the fact that it was a sting operation at all.
Yeah.
Because again, what the fuck are you expecting from a place like that?
Yeah, and again, look, a part of me, again, doesn't matter either way. I'm just saying, I like that we do bring it up though, is the fact that he does. Like Rubens did say, look, I didn't actually do the specific thing they're saying I even did. I just went to see a dirty movie. I'm like, the question of like, why do you see a dirty movie in a theater if you don't do that? But it's like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Which again, I think is the point. So again, regardless though, either way, it's like there's no
like if he didn't actually expose himself, that's crazy, dude.
That's like
crazier.
My heart of hearts makes me believe him that he didn't. I mean, again, still, I don't know. Regardless,
honestly, I think he's mature and adult enough about the situation that he would admit it if he did.
I would, yeah, I'd like to think so. But again, in the whole like the last interview not happening, he might have admitted one way or another to something actually happened. But I would like again the point. It's immaterial. The fact is, again, he was forced to take a plea deal just to kind of put an end to it. And again, he probably could have won.
He was forced to register as a sex offender, man. Oh God.
Well, that's the second one though, which we'll get to.
Was it the second one?
Yeah, that's the second one. Okay. Yeah, that's the thing. We're kind of conflating the two here. The point being, real quick aside. I remember there was with the whole raids and the vice squads and all this stuff. There's an episode of Boston Legal I watched. Now, they kind of made a mockery of this sort of thing, where it was a very different context. Basically, it was Denny Crane, the William Shatner character. He just went to the bathroom, all right, and it was a thing where he was going for a wide berth. Let's put it colorfully, okay?
Oh, no.
So his foot was like under the stall because his leg, put like a briefcase in front of the door because he has a briefcase, and his foot was like under the other stall just again because he was opening his legs. Mm-hmm. And it was then the guys come in thinking he was soliciting gay sex, and basically he was taking the court over thinking that again because it was probably a sting operation sort of a thing. It was ridiculous. So they had to prove in court, and like Alan Shore, the James Spader character, had to prove like my client just had to use the bathroom. This is a farce.
Right.
So again, the Vice Squad thing's always kind of a joke with these sort of like hatchet jobs. Anyway, so the point being, I love that there was a groundswell of support. Like people were calling saying, we don't care, man. It was okay. It's and the MTV Movie Awards, which again, Pee Wee Herman was very integral to MTV, and the fact that they paid it forward as well. That come back, have a big public display, and that really did a lot of damage control for him. That they did the drug PSA. So he worked hard, but even after that, he was a shut-in, man. And I love the story. I had no idea about this until this documentary. I had no idea he was friends with Debbie Mazar and David Arquette. How really lovely they were to
Yeah, for sure.
I'm so genuinely moved by how sweet
David
a friend.
Arquette needs a comeback the same way that Josh Hartnett got a comeback.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I'm just throwing it out there into the universe.
I don't see why not. But yeah, Debbie Mazar, though, is the fact that they were kind of in a relationship, but not in the romantic sense. They were very close. She helped. She gave him friends in his life. She got him out in the world a little bit. She was there for him. They were kind of like not work wives, like social wives. Anyway, so again, the Howard Stern thing obviously also was a detriment, and also like I think it's Donna Kaufman, like one of the, like, she really did a hatchet job to him. He's a depraved individual. Like, oh, just because he disagreed with you on the set. Yeah, Dana.
Right.
God. Anyway, so again, just the recovery process and all that, he went through leaps and bounds, and then 10 years later, that scumbag DA, Rocky Delgadillo, that guy. I'm just gonna shout him, this
And
scumbag.
this whole thing, man, it was such a fucking frame job from the start. And they were basically weaponizing the fact that he was a children's host with a kind of ambiguous past and a kind of ambiguous sexuality. Makes me say just so homophobia coded, just so
yeah.
I don't even know how to talk about this without getting angry, Dragon.
Well, it's just the fact that I'm still discussing the fact that it was a DA just trying to impress. Now they got a new job. That's essentially all it was. And he was already elected. That's the thing that just makes it really ridiculous.
Right.
Like, really, you have to just you have to impress that much. You're gonna have to drag a guy's name through. He's already been through it with the whole other thing. He's gonna make a career on it, and only because he had like one interaction. He was basically in the same room as Jeffrey Jones. That's the only reason he was even on the radar. They were able to get anything for him. Here's the fact that some lady who identified Jones is like, well, he was at a party once with Paul Rubens, so he was in the same room as him.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason. Which again, probably maybe by proxy the Tim Burton connection.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, on some
the only reason I would imagine they would maybe be in the same space. Probably anyway. So just the idea they raided his collection, and again, they don't really state it implicitly, but again, the presumption is that he was kind of outed with this again. So again, it's questionable because
I kind of feel like he was probably outed with the first incident a little bit.
Well, it depends on if they said what the dirty movie was, but even that's the thing. If it was kind of LGBT, kind of Q related, I think that maybe would have outed them. I think there was speculation because anyway, this, however, was a thing where they did sweep this under the rug because he did. Remember, the reason you and I don't know this because it happened and it was kind of put out, and it was more of a flicker than it was. The Rubens had this great quote of like saying, people have the mind of an elephant, like of a steel trap, saying, "Oh, this will blow over." Oh no, it's not going to blow over. Like 30 years later, people are still making fun of still bringing up the movie theorists. Thankfully, I honestly want to say that post Pee-wee's Big Holiday, people have kind of lightened up on it tremendously, which I think is for the better. It's for the best. It's like the curse of Paul Rubens. Unfortunately, the curse of this poor guy's life is that had the internet been around, he wouldn't have to worry. Had the internet been around,
honestly, this dude would have been like even bigger than he already was.
That's the thing. Like again, he wouldn't have had to be as cloak and dagger as he was about certain things. He wouldn't have had to.
No, if anything, he would be celebrated as like an LGBT icon.
Exactly. It's that's always the thing. Anyway, but again, so he has like this, collection. Basically, it's like 50s era, like homoerotic artwork, essentially. Of just kind of, and essentially they kind of make a mountain out of a molehill, like it's which essentially is. They're calling it, like it's pornography of a really offensive nature. And yet, I think the most disgusting part of it is the fact, basically making him out to be a pedophile, which is completely wrong and just terrible. And again, the fact that, they're using like the photos of, they had an assistant, a lovely girl named Allison who had a baby. And we see like she's pregnant. We see her give birth to the kid. And it's a really nice thing. Paul Rubens is like an uncle of some sort to the girl.
Uh-huh.
And just the fact that, they're using like the photos and they're going to the girls' school and everything. And at the end of the day, just Rubens having to take the scumbag DA is taking all this time just to, like, on the very last day to file charges, he files one charge. He has to take one charge. I hate
that. Oh, that drove me fucking crazy.
We couldn't let it just go away. Like, no, we just like drag him through the mud a little bit just to serve the prison. No, we have to bring him down on one thing. So he has to take an obscenity charge, not the actual thing he was trying. Well, not the thing the horrible thing he was trying to make him like fully, that. And the fact that he has to, I love the distinction here. So again, it adds like a little bit of sugar on the whole terror, how bad this really
Not
could have been.
really, though. I
Well,
mean,
that's
it's
so.
like it's almost kind of just like, hey, instead of eating like a full brick of shit, you just get to drink some piss instead.
Well, no. I'm getting at is the specifics of the term. So again, subsidy charge. He had like $100 fine and 3 years as a sex offender instead of like for life. That would have been that's the only somewhat silver line. And he was able to go on like an interview and explain himself. Like tell like, look, this is like I want to live in a world where I can collect what I want to collect. It's just again we put this poor guy through a ringer, and it's just that you had to wonder how the heck does he get out again. He had like a bit of a comeback with Blow and Mystery Man and all
I mean,
these
I'm
kind of
not
like
gonna lie,
projects.
Dragon. Like, if this kind of thing happened to me, I would probably be dead. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not gonna make.
for a second time, yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure. I'm just saying, like, if it was like just that blatantly, like people are trying to target me for something so heinous, like, yeah, So, like I said, I mean, just to bring it back to a positive note, I mean,
Well,
like,
yeah.
I just admire the hell out of his resilience. I mean, he certainly had some dark times and some dark days, but man, he never fully gave up on life. And I mean, given the circumstances, dude, that really does take some willpower.
And again, it's just really nice that in him coming back, he was able to come back from zero, where it was like he went back to the very beginnings of Pee Wee, where he did the stage show, which is where essentially Pee Wee started, and then he gets another movie. So it's kind of like it's suggesting that Rubens was kind of on a path of like kind of renewal and rebirth of like forget all the horrible stuff that happened, just you're starting new again, knowing what you know now, wiser and all this. And just people, time has passed, people have forgotten, no one cares. Just do what you've always wanted to do.
Sure.
And and again, I wish we had a little bit more Big Holly, but what we did get, at least it made it. And we mentioned this was like the high point. This and thing as the documentary goes, this is like the last big happy thing that happens to him, and then we get to like the abrupt ends of the interviews, which again, so impressively, like we're already like, okay, this is great, and then we have to hit the reality. And the way we hit the reality is not what you're expecting. Okay, and then he got sick, but we're not doing it. It's an abrupt end of the interviews, and it's just I'm completely caught off guard. I'm moved. I'm like, him like talking to the director and saying, you know what? No, I don't want to. Why don't you? The director's like starting a conversation. Like, why don't you trust me? Well, this is a give and take process, and you can sense the discomfort, and just like all these crushing realities of text of like and Paul Rubens never came in for that to do the last interview, and it's and then you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or that realization that you've been distracted by being so enamored and sucked into this story. It's like you forgot just long enough that, oh right, we have to, if it's kind of cradle to grave, we have to go to the graveside.
Sure, yeah.
So in his last moments, we have this piano music that plays, and it just guts me to my core, man. This beautiful piece of piano music that plays, just right, and we play it a couple times here and there, like when it's kind of like him going through it, and we just kind of play it here, where it's like it's like the day before he died, he made this video. And just the fact that it was like the day before, and we've seen him. You look at him.
It's almost like he knew he was on, like, very much on his way out.
You can hear it in his voice.
Man, how shaky he. I mean, he almost sounds like an entirely different person just from the interviews.
So that's what I want to hit on. So the interviews, he's very well put together. He's kind of you would not imagine he is sick, and that's the whole thing. Like no one in the crew or at all. No one. It was very knowing how guarded the man's secrets were. He was
kind of getting up there in age, but he wasn't like that old when he died.
That's the thing. He was like 60.
He wasn't elderly. Yeah,
he was like early 60s, if not even 60. He was like 63 maybe. But
let me.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Actually, wait, no, he was 70. I think he actually was 70. Sorry.
Yeah,
but he was a youthful.
I wouldn't even consider that like fully elderly.
He was a very youthful 70.
My parents are pushing 70.
Well, that's the thing. Like the point, he was a very youthful 70.
Mm-hmm.
regardless, it's the fact that again you could absolutely understand why the filmmaker and everyone else would like they would have no clue as to what he's going through because he doesn't really look at it all, and he could put on that again. He's put on like a persona of a character for years. Of course he could do it. It's essentially character work while he's sick.
Right.
But yeah, so essentially day before his death, and you can sense the weakness and the desperation, and just like he's basically it's like the panic of oh god, I've kind of burned my bridge with my director. I refuse to do an interview, and I have to say something knowing that I declined to do the interview, just something so I can just get it out there in the world what I hope to achieve in this documentary, which basically is like he wanted to tell the world that that really hurt my feelings. The second, especially the second thing is in general, but the idea of even the first thing did kind of bring the whole reason Pee-wee's Playhouse went off the air is because people thought there were some undertones of now he would be a pedophile, which of course was remotely untrue. There's no reason to correlate the two things. And then of course the second thing is like that's the nail in the coffin for any of that. And basically that was the thing that really truly hurt him. And as far as you and I knew, and I think as far as the public knew, like, again, it would seem that he has moved past that, and you think that he had been on like with Pee Wee's Big Holiday and everything. He's like what, things are on a nice trajectory for him. But it's the fact that like in those last moments, he wanted to express to the world that I got a raw deal with that, and I want people to know how much that hurts, and hopefully people won't do that to each other when I'm gone.
Sure, absolutely.
So it's kind of a plea of just like be labeled a pariah like that when it's not true. That really hurts. And sadly, again, in the age of like, had the internet been around for good or for bad, he would have been either protected or understood, or he wouldn't have provided more context, or who knows. And here, it's in the era that we're in now, people get accused of things left and right, and I'm just saying that this is it's a thing that's as relevant now as it was then. And Rubens, I think he's making a very good point. It's a very good message that he got in there. Something to learn from that we can't just that words can hurt people, especially if you lob them, and there's consequences to everything that we do. And that we shouldn't be afraid to be who we are. We shouldn't be afraid. We shouldn't, have to hide.
We're also living in this like culture where everyone's like terrified of being cringe, quote unquote. And I actually watched a video essay about that very subject recently, and I gotta say, man, it really struck a chord with me, because it's like, if everyone is like bending over backwards to not be cringe, whatever the hell that even means, we're not going to get anybody like Paul Rubens ever again. We're not going to get anybody who's as authentic,
Yeah. At the end of this documentary, Tiki, I do struggle with, when I look back on this documentary, I struggle with, I don't want to see, at the end of the day, Rubens doesn't want to be seen as a victim, but I do feel great sympathy towards him. So I do see him kind of as a victim for the stuff that he endured.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point I didn't even really think about, but you do have a point there. It is like, honestly, Dragon, the way that I reconcile that is like I've kind of been saying, like, I just have mad respect for the guy for being so resilient in the small. And I think that's what he would want you to take away from it.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm thinking of like all the positive stuff he put out there, like Big Holiday, and the fact that he came back and it was like this moment of like triumph and glory for him, and that we were still thinking fondly of like, every time he popped up, and like again, even like the Quiz Lady, it's just like, oh my god, there he is, and he's still just even in his old age, he hasn't lost a step. It's it's kind of in the winter of his years, he hasn't lost the step. He still got it. He still knows how to like be funny. And all the interviews that we've had, there's been a lot of fun to them. He's been really witty and on point. It's like, oh man, just to remind you how much you love this guy, and the fact that we're seeing him in kind of a victim circumstance in those places is a reminder of, we feel that way because we love him.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing to hit on, unless you have anything else.
I honestly have kind of said my piece with the whole thing. I don't even really feel like I need to add any final thoughts or anything for me.
Well, there's one thing I want to throw in there. I love that the ending of this documentary is goes all the way back to like a clip from the first stage show with the original play of Pee-wee, where it was like he wanted to, he got a wish from John B, and the wish was to fly, and he was, he gave up the wish to was it Captain Carl?
Yeah, God, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Phil Hartman's pirate character. Forgive me, folks. I think it was like Captain C or something. I think it was Captain Carl.
You want me to look it up really quick?
Yeah, sure, real quick. Yeah.
All right.
So that he and Miss Yvonne would they would be they would be able to like each other
Captain
in
Carl, you're right.
Right. Be able to like each other, like really like each other. Anyway, so the point being, he was rewarded with the wish of flight. So I love that. At the end of the day, the last clip is like Pee-wee's wish being granted, which is the wish of flight. So we're seeing like the little head flying, the little body, and him saying goodbye. But with that,
that was such a freaking good image to end on. By the way,
it's a good image to end on, and I like how thematically the way I read it thematically is that it's Ruben's last response to the interviews was that he said how he would have done the documentary. And again, like I said earlier, I really feel that the reason we end on like it's him getting his wish granted essentially is like he's being portrayed, at least the way I come away with this documentary is he's being portrayed the way he said he wanted at the very end of it. And that's essentially we see a lot of talking heads. That's him doing all the talking about his life. And the only times we really go away from that is the times we need to talk about the stuff we didn't do in the last interview. But everything else is pretty much on brand with what he wanted, the vision of the project to be. So I think at the end of the day, we granted Pee-wee's wish as his final wish. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the appropriate place it ends on. He flies away, and this had you want. It's like, what do you say to an icon's no longer here, and like, what's the last like? What do you kind of part terms like? And I think ultimately it's that. Well, you say goodbye, and that's kind of what this is. This is the cathartic goodbye to Paul Reubens. That's kind of what this is.
That's kind of what we all needed, honestly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have any final statements, Dragon?
This is
an utter. I feel like I kind of said my piece on this.
This is an utterly fantastic and flawless documentary, and this is the kind of stuff I live for. And I love that HBO has been kind of like hitting it out of the ballpark with these between our feature lengths with the Christopher Reeve documentary, our two-parters like this, and this is the magic of documentaries, man, and why we need to value like the impact of our pop cultural icons.
You see, Academy.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, big thanks to Code Geass, Teddy, and Eli, aka Little Blue Productions, for joining us in the comments. You guys all rock. Stay tuned. This coming Thursday, we will be having our finale of Miyazaki, so look forward to that. And yeah, that's about it, everybody. Have a good night. See y'all later. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Oh!